In a world addicted to reaction, your silence becomes dangerous. Everyone reacts. They argue, they defend, they explain, they try to win. But the moment they do, they reveal everything. Their emotions, their pressure points, their need for control. And that's exactly what others are looking for. Because reaction is access. Access to your state, your attention, your energy. But what happens when you give nothing? No reaction, no urgency, no emotional movement. Not because you don't feel, but because you choose not to show it. That's not weakness. That's a weapon. This is the mindset of the silent hunter. And once you understand it, you stop playing the game and start controlling it. 1. The world runs on reaction. The world runs on reaction. Not logic, not truth, not even intention. Reaction. Look closely at any conflict, any argument, any moment of tension. It doesn't begin with facts. It begins with a trigger, a word, a tone, a look, something small that creates movement. And once that movement begins, everything else follows. Voices rise, emotions surface, control begins to slip, because reaction spreads. One person reacts, the other responds. That response becomes stronger, more emotional, more intense, and before long, the situation escalates beyond control. Not because of what was said, but because of how it was received. This is the pattern, and most people are trapped inside it. They believe they are thinking, but they are not. They are reacting, automatically, instantly, predictably, and predictability is what gives others power over you. Because once your reactions are predictable, you can be controlled, easily. All someone has to do is press the right point, say the right thing, use the right tone, create the right pressure, and your response will follow. Not by choice, but by instinct. This is how manipulation works. Not through force, but through reaction. Because reaction gives access. Access to your emotions, your attention, your focus. And once someone has your attention, they have influence. Think about it. When you're calm, you are in control. Your thoughts are clear. Your decisions are intentional. Your presence is stable. But the moment you react, everything changes. Your mind speeds up. Your emotions rise. Your focus narrows. You stop observing and start responding. And in that shift, you lose perspective. You become involved, pulled into the situation, engaged on a level that is no longer neutral. And once you are engaged, you can be guided, directed, moved. This is why reaction is so valuable. Not because it solves anything, but because it creates opportunity. Opportunity for others to push further, test boundaries, apply pressure. Because now, they know you're involved. They know you care. And caring is where leverage begins. The more you care about being understood, the easier it is to control you. The more you care about being right, the easier it is to provoke you. The more you care about your image, the easier it is to challenge you. Because all of those things create emotional entry points. And once those entry points are found, reaction becomes inevitable. This is why certain people seem to always stay in control. Not because they are smarter, not because they are louder, but because they react less. They don't give immediate responses. They don't rush to defend themselves. They don't let every situation pull them in. They observe, they wait, they choose. And that choice is what separates them. Because while others are reacting, they are analyzing. While others are escalating, they are stabilizing. While others are losing control, they are gaining it. This is the difference. Not in intelligence, but in discipline. The discipline to resist the first impulse. The impulse to react. Because that impulse is not yours. It's triggered. And anything that can be triggered can be controlled. That's the reality most people never see. They think they're responding freely, but in truth, they're being guided, pulled from one reaction to the next, without realizing it. And the more they react, the deeper they go, further into the situation, further into the emotion, further away from control, until eventually, they are no longer choosing their actions. They are simply following the momentum. This is how power is lost. Not all at once, but in small reactions, moment by moment, word by word, until control is gone. And the other person holds the frame. This is why understanding reaction is the first step, because once you see it, you begin to recognize the pattern. You begin to notice the triggers, the pressure, the pull. And in that awareness, something changes. You create space. Space between the trigger and your response. And in that space, you regain control. Because now, you are no longer reacting automatically. You are choosing. And choice is where power begins. The world may run on reaction, but you don't have to. And the moment you step outside that pattern, you stop being controlled by it and start controlling it silently. 2. Why indifference feels unnatural. Indifference sounds simple. Just don't react. That's what people say. As if control were that easy. As if you could simply turn off your response whenever pressure appears. But when the moment comes, it doesn't feel simple. It feels almost impossible. Because the urge to react is not random. It's built into you. When someone challenges you, something activates instantly. You feel it in your chest, a tightening, a surge of energy. Your thoughts accelerate. You begin forming responses, rehearsing explanations, preparing defenses, and all of this happens before you even speak. Because your mind is trying to do one thing: restore control. It wants to fix the situation, correct the misunderstanding, protect your image. And beneath all of that, there is something deeper. Something most people never question. The need to be understood. The need to be seen accurately. To be judged fairly. To not be misrepresented. And when that need is threatened, reaction becomes automatic. Because staying silent feels like allowing something false to exist. Feels like losing. Like surrendering control. Like giving up your voice. That's why indifference feels unnatural. Not because it is weak, but because it goes against your conditioning. From a young age, you are taught to respond, to explain yourself, to defend your position, to speak when challenged. Silence is often interpreted as guilt, or weakness, or inability. So when you choose not to react, it creates internal conflict. Part of you wants to stay calm, but another part pushes you to respond, to fix, to clarify, to regain balance. This internal tension is the real battle, not the accusation, not the situation, but the fight between instinct and control. Because instinct says, react now. Control says, wait. And waiting feels uncomfortable, because discomfort is the signal your mind uses to force action. Creates urgency, a need to do something, anything, just to release the pressure. And reaction becomes the fastest way to do that. You speak, you explain, you defend, and instantly, the tension drops. But what you don't realize is that you didn't solve the situation. You only relieved your discomfort. And in doing so, you gave something away, your position. Because now, you've shown that you can be moved. That pressure creates response. That your state can be influenced. And once that becomes visible, can be used, again and again. This is why indifference requires discipline, not emotional suppression, not pretending not to care, but the ability to sit inside that discomfort without reacting, to feel the urge and not follow it, to experience pressure and remain still, because the moment you do that, something changes. The urgency fades. The need to respond weakens, and you begin to see clearly again, not through emotion, but through awareness. This is where indifference becomes powerful, not as a default state, but as a chosen one. Because now, you are no longer reacting automatically. You are deciding, and decision is control. Most people never reach this point because they mistake indifference for apathy. They think it means not caring, not feeling, disconnecting completely, but that's not strength. That's avoidance. Real indifference is different. You still feel everything. You notice the tone. You recognize the intention. You understand the situation, but you don't give your reaction on demand. You don't hand over your energy just because someone expects it. You don't let external pressure dictate your internal state. That is control. And control always feels unnatural at first because it requires you to break patterns, to resist habits, to override instinct. But over time, it becomes easier. The urge to react becomes weaker. The pause becomes longer. The space between trigger and response becomes yours. And in that space, you gain something most people never have: freedom. Freedom from manipulation. Freedom from emotional control. Freedom from automatic reaction. Because now, you are no longer predictable. And what is unpredictable cannot be easily controlled. This is why indifference feels unnatural. Because it removes you from the system most people operate in. A system built on reaction. But once you step outside of it, you see everything differently. The triggers, the patterns, the attempts to provoke. And instead of being pulled in, you remain still, observing, choosing, controlling. And in that state, you are no longer part of the reaction. You are above it. 3. The power of starvation. Every interaction runs on energy, not just words, not just actions. Energy, tension, emotion, reaction. This is what fuels every conflict, every argument, every attempt to provoke. Without it, nothing continues. This is the part most people never see. They think situations escalate because of what is said, but that's not what sustains them. What sustains them is what you give, your reaction. The moment you respond emotionally, you supply energy, and that energy keeps the interaction alive. Think about it. When someone provokes you, they are not just speaking, they are reaching for a response, reaching for engagement, reaching for something they can build on. And the moment you give it, they have what they need. They push further. They adjust their approach. They continue. Because now, they have feedback. They can see what affects you, what moves you, what creates pressure. And once they have that, they can control the direction. This is why reaction is valuable. Not to you, but to them. Because every response you give feeds the interaction. More words, more emotion, more momentum. And momentum is what traps you. Because once something gains momentum, it becomes harder to stop. You're pulled deeper, more invested, more involved, until eventually, you're no longer choosing to engage. You're caught in it, responding again and again, trying to resolve something that keeps expanding. But what if you remove the fuel? What if you stop feeding it? This is where the dynamic breaks. Because without your energy, there is nothing to sustain, no reaction to build on, no emotion to escalate, no signal to guide the next move, just silence. And silence is empty. It gives nothing. And because it gives nothing, takes everything away. This is the power of starvation. Not aggressive, not forceful, but absolute. When you refuse to react, you don't fight the interaction. You let it collapse. Because it cannot survive without your participation. This creates something powerful. Discomfort. Silence stretches longer than expected. The tension doesn't resolve. The moment lingers, and the other person feels it because they were expecting movement. They were expecting resistance. They were expecting engagement. But instead, they are met with nothing. And that nothing becomes pressure. Because now they don't know what to do. Their pattern is broken. Their rhythm is gone. Their strategy has no direction. So they try again. They push harder, speak louder, repeat themselves, trying to force a reaction, trying to restore the flow. But the more they try, the more it exposes something deeper, need, because now, they are the ones seeking engagement. They are the ones trying to pull you in. And trying reveals dependence. Dependence on your response. Dependence on your energy. Dependence on your participation. And once that becomes visible, their position weakens. Because the one who needs the interaction is not in control of it. The one who can walk away is. This is the reversal. First, they were applying pressure. Now, they are feeling it. Because silence creates a void. And humans are uncomfortable with voids. They try to fill them with words, with emotion, with effort. But the more they try, the more unstable they become. Because they are acting without feedback, without direction, without control. And in that instability, their behavior becomes visible, more aggressive, more emotional, more exposed, because there is nothing balancing it. Before, your reaction kept things equal. Now, their behavior stands alone. And when behavior stands alone, it reveals intention, not what they say, but why they are saying it. And once intention is visible, control is lost. Because manipulation only works when it is hidden. This is the deeper level of starvation. You're not just removing energy. You're removing cover. You're allowing the interaction to reveal itself without interference, without reaction, without distortion. And in that clarity, power shifts completely, because now, you are not inside the situation. You are above it, observing it, understanding it, controlling your place within it. While they remain inside, reacting, trying, pushing. This is why silence feels so powerful. Not because it is passive, but because it is selective. It chooses not to give. And what you do not give cannot be taken. This is the principle. Simple, but rarely applied. Because most people cannot tolerate the discomfort. They feel the tension, and they rush to resolve it. They speak too soon, react too quickly, give too much, and in doing so, they restart the cycle. But if you hold that silence just a little longer, everything changes. The momentum breaks, the pressure shifts, the control returns, not through effort, but through absence. This is the power of starvation. Not to overpower, but to remove what sustains the interaction. And once you understand this, you stop trying to win arguments and start letting them end on their own. Because without your energy, they cannot continue. And without continuation, there is no control, only silence. And in that silence, you win. 4. Controlled indifference, not apathy. At this point, there's a dangerous misunderstanding, one that destroys the entire strategy before it even works. People hear indifference, and they think it means not caring, not feeling, not engaging at all. They think it means becoming cold, detached, emotionless. But that is not power, that's avoidance. And avoidance is easy to see. When someone is truly disconnected, it shows. Their presence fades. Their awareness drops. Their control weakens. They're not above the situation. They're escaping it. And escape is not dominance. It's absence without control. Controlled indifference is different. Completely different. It is not about feeling less. It is about revealing less. You still notice everything. Every word. Every tone. Every shift in behavior. You understand the intention behind it. You recognize the pressure. You feel the pull to react. But instead of responding immediately, you hold it. You contain it. You decide what deserves a response and what doesn't. Because not everything deserves your energy. Not every comment requires explanation. Not every accusation needs a defense. Not every situation is worth entering. And once you understand that, your reactions become selective, intentional, controlled. This is where real power begins. Because now, you are no longer responding on impulse. You are responding on choice. And choice creates unpredictability. No one knows how you will react. Because you don't react automatically. You evaluate first. And that evaluation happens in silence. This is what makes controlled indifference powerful. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. No reaction, no movement, no emotion. But internally, everything is active. You are observing, analyzing, deciding, and that difference is invisible. Others cannot see your process. They only see the result, stillness. And stillness is unsettling because people expect feedback. They expect signs, signals, reactions they can read. But when those signals are missing, they lose clarity. They don't know. Did it affect you? Did it matter? Are you ignoring them or controlling yourself? That uncertainty creates pressure because now they are guessing, and guessing removes control. This is why controlled indifference works. Not because it shuts down the interaction, but because it removes predictability. And without predictability, manipulation becomes difficult. Because manipulation depends on patterns, expected responses, emotional triggers. But when those patterns disappear, there is nothing to use. No leverage, no direction, no control. This is where most people fail. They try to act indifferent. They force silence. They suppress emotion. They pretend not to care. But internally, they are still reacting, still affected, still engaged. And that internal tension leaks through body language, through tone, through subtle signals. And those signals are enough, because even a small reaction is still information, and information is what others use. This is why control must be real, not performed. You cannot fake indifference. You must be in control. That means you accept the discomfort. You allow the moment to exist. You resist the urge to fix it immediately. You let things remain unresolved without needing to resolve them. And that is what most people cannot do. They need closure. They need clarity. They need response. But controlled indifference removes that need. You no longer depend on immediate resolution. You are comfortable with silence, comfortable with uncertainty, comfortable with not reacting. And that comfort is what creates dominance. Because the one who is comfortable in uncertainty controls those who are not. They stay calm, while others rush to fill the space. They remain still, while others try to force movement. They observe, while others expose themselves. This is the difference. Not in intelligence, not in strength, but in control. Controlled indifference is not about disengaging from life. It is about engaging on your own terms, not when triggered, not when pressured, but when you choose. And that choice is what separates reaction from power. Because now, you are no longer part of the system. You are not feeding it, not responding to it, not being moved by it. You are outside of it, watching, understanding, deciding, and from that position, you are untouchable. Not because nothing reaches you, but because nothing moves you without your permission. 5. Applying the silent hunter mindset. Understanding control is one thing. Living it is something else entirely. Because when the moment comes, when someone challenges you, questions you, pushes you, your instincts don't disappear. You still feel the pressure. You still feel the urge to react. You still feel that pull to explain, to defend, to respond. And this is where most people fail. Not because they don't understand the strategy, but because they cannot apply it in real time. So this is where it becomes practical. Not theory, not concepts, but execution. Because the silent hunter mindset is built on one simple principle. You do not react on demand. Everything begins there. Step 1, create the pause. Before anything else, you pause. Even 1 second is enough, because that pause breaks the pattern. It stops the automatic reaction. It interrupts the instinct, creates space. And in that space, you regain control. Most people don't pause. They respond immediately, and that immediacy is what makes them predictable. But you slow it down, and that alone changes the dynamic. Step 2. Control your signals. People don't just listen to your words. They read your state, your face, your tone, your body. So before you speak, you stabilize. No visible frustration, no defensive tone, no urgency. Your voice becomes slower. Your movements become minimal. Your expression becomes neutral, because control is communicated before words are spoken. And when your state is calm, you appear unshaken. And appearing unshaken is power. Step 3. Remove unnecessary response. You don't need to answer everything. You don't need to correct every assumption. You don't need to respond to every comment. This is where restraint matters. Sometimes, the strongest response is no response, a pause, a look, silence, because silence forces the other person to sit with their own words, without your reaction to support them, and without support, their energy fades. Step 4. Use minimal, controlled language. When you do speak, you keep it simple, not long explanations, not emotional reactions, just controlled, precise responses. For example, if there's something specific, say it clearly, or that's your perspective, or simply, okay, nothing more, because the more you say, the more you reveal, and the more you reveal, the more others can use. So you stay minimal, clear, unmoved. Step 5. Detach from the need to win. This is the hardest part. Most people react because they want to win, to prove they're right, to correct the narrative, to protect their image. But that need is what traps them, because the moment you need to win, you are already engaged, already reacting, already inside the frame. The silent hunter doesn't need to win, because they are not playing the same game. They are observing, detached, uninvested in the outcome, and that detachment removes pressure, because now, you are not trying to force anything. You are simply allowing the situation to reveal itself. Step 6. Hold your position. Once you choose not to react, stay there. Don't break it. Don't return to explanation. Don't give in to pressure, because pressure will come. The other person may push harder, repeat themselves, try different angles, all to provoke a response. But you remain still, consistent, unmoved, because consistency builds perception, and perception creates authority. The moment you break, even slightly, the frame resets, so you hold, not rigidly, but calmly, naturally. Step 7. Exit without force. You don't need to dominate the interaction. You don't need a final word. Sometimes, you simply disengage, not abruptly, not emotionally, just step away, because the silent hunter does not chase and does not need to stay. They choose where their energy goes, and more importantly, where it doesn't. The final shift. First, this will feel unnatural. You will feel the urge to react, the pressure to speak, the need to explain. But over time, something changes. The pause becomes easier. The silence becomes comfortable. The reactions become fewer. And eventually, you reach a point where you are no longer pulled into situations. You are no longer controlled by triggers. You are no longer reacting automatically. You are choosing, always choosing. And that choice is power, because now, your presence changes. People notice it. They feel it. They sense that you are not easily moved, not easily provoked, not easily controlled. And because of that, they adjust. They become more careful, more measured, more aware, because they no longer have access to your reactions. And without that access, their influence disappears. This is the silent hunter mindset. Not loud, not aggressive, but precise, controlled, unshakable. And once you master it, you don't need to prove anything. You don't need to defend anything. You don't need to react to everything, because your control speaks for you. And in that silence, you hold the power, the final. Most people think power is loud, visible, expressive, forceful. But real power is quiet. It doesn't rush. It doesn't react. It doesn't chase. It waits, observes, chooses. Because the one who controls their reactions controls everything that follows. And the one who gives nothing away cannot be used. This is the silent hunter. Not aggressive, not emotional, but always in control. And once you master this, you don't just avoid manipulation. You become untouchable. Not because you fight harder, but because you no longer need to fight at all.